Hey, it's Justin Goff. So I'm here with Copy Accelerator member and my good friend, Alec Rosa. Alec used to be a financial advisor just a couple years ago, and now he is an email copywriter writing for numerous different companies. And this year in 2020, he's on his way to have a six-figure year writing email copy. So we're going to kind of go through Alec's journey of how he went from where he was and not really knowing anything about copywriting or internet marketing to kind of getting into this world and becoming pretty successful pretty quickly. So let's start kind of back at the beginning. So you were a financial advisor. Give me a little feeling of like what that was like daily. Like what kind of money were you making? Like, did you actually enjoy it?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, I came out of school with the very basic premise of like my way to make money is you go to a big corporation. I was a good math guy. So I was like, all right, like let's do finance. Came out, became an advisor with Fidelity, was making, I don't know, 60, 80 grand the first year or so. And then was making somewhere between like 100 to 150 after that. And, my job was basically come in, sit down, meet with clients, retired 50 plus, and convince them to honestly put their money in like a managed account, with the management being from the company I worked for. So I was just literally like on the phones all day, talking in appointments for like hours, taking them through a process, having meetings with my manager who was telling me what I should do, what I should not do, who I should be talking to. And that was kind of like day in, day out of what I was doing at Fidelity.
Were you doing like cold calling and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I was doing cold calling. It wasn't so much cold calling. We had a list of kind of like warm leads that were in the system with Fidelity, and so it wasn't straight cold calling, but it kind of felt like it. It was probably a lot easier than that, but yeah, it still sucked. And then so doing basically on the phones and then meeting with people.
Right. So I guess in regards to, let's say, some of the downsides of that, I would have to imagine being in an office every day is probably something you wanted to get away from. I would assume you probably had to wear like a shirt, tie, jacket kind of
100%.
thing
Call
every
it my
day.
my suit of armor, my fish suit. I so basically I got into it thinking it was like awesome. I'd been promised I'd be making like 200, 300K in like 2 years. And of course I was like 22 out of school. I was like, sick, this is going to be awesome. Make like twice as much as my dad. This is going to be great. And started doing it. And like, at first I was excited because I was learning stuff, but it like was not fun. I was living in LA. It was like a 35-minute commute both each way. So I was in traffic for like an hour, almost hour and a half some days, going to this job where my manager sucked, was constantly trying to tell me how to do things for a job that he'd never done before, which was awesome. The whole, like, if you were basically having a non-copywriter telling you what to do, or a non-business person who thinks he knows what he's got, he's like, I've seen it work for 20 years, so I know what's going on. So it was great. And, the funny thing about, I never thought about entrepreneurship at all. Like, it just wasn't in my sphere of influence. My dad's a firefighter, mom's a teacher, grandpa had worked for like Mattel. So I was just basically, I was going to do this. I was going to work for a corporation. I was doing the normal road. And my turning point came when I started dating this girl that was a YouTube influencer. This was back in 2015. She had like, 1 million, 2 million followers on YouTube. And there couldn't have been a more different like lifestyle. Like, I was driving, hour and a half, 2 hours every day to go to this office job where I had to dress up in a suit and like crappy clothes with shoes that hurt my feet all day, with like stuffy clients who were like not interesting, who didn't think anything of me because I'm like this 25-year-old trying to tell like a 70-year-old what to do with their money, with a manager that was like talked down to me and trying to tell me how to do a job he'd never done. And then I'd go hang out with her. And of course, like, she's been in PJs all day. She like put on makeup, shot a cooking video, has been like editing it kinda on her brand new MacBook Pro in this 20-story, like the 20th floor of this downtown high rise in LA, all while like Seinfeld's on in the background, and she has like friends coming over and she's getting stuff favored to her and like Uber Eats. And I'm just like, I'd come back and she'd be like, what's up? How was your day? I'm like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. And meanwhile, not only is this all going on, she's making like twice as much money as I am. Like 4 times when we met, like she was making like, 250, 300 a year. And so I'm like, what is going on that I'm like busting my ass at something I hate doing, And she's literally like in PJs, like, oh, like, I'm so tired today. I had to edit videos, like, which is not to say it's not like work. There's definitely like a difference between like you're in like Lulu sweats and I'm like in a suit all day driving. You're like, oh, so tired. And that was like my first taste of like, oh, so you don't have to make money from like a company. You don't have to make money from a corporation. You can do it in another way. And that kind of drove me to start looking at other things and try to start figuring something else on my own.
That's really funny. So kind of after that, this is probably like 2017-ish, you and I met. We were doing a personal development program together. I was one of the guys teaching the business portion of it. And you mentioned, you were one of the few who mentioned that you were interested in kind of learning how to make some money online. It was you, Tanner, and Blake, kind of who were like the three who kind of really stood out as to who was really interested in it. It was interesting too, because I've had a lot of experience before with trying to help people, and usually it's just a fruitless mission because nobody you try to help actually ever fucking listens to you and doesn't do what you say, and they say they're all in and then they're never actually all in. But it was different with you guys because you guys were actually serious about it. I remember talking to you. One of the things I remember is we had to write a weekly like journal during the program, kind of recapping how our week was and talking about what was going on. I remember reading yours every week, and it stood out to me that you were a pretty like entertaining writer. Like you kind of naturally were telling stories, and it was just pretty interesting to read your stuff. And part of me, just my copywriting brain, I was like, oh, he'd probably be a pretty decent copywriter just with the way he kind of talks. And I remember, I think later I told you you'd probably be really good writing health stuff because you naturally talk in a way that like women talk. You tell stories, you talk in like very like emotional language. Chris Haddad does very similar stuff, as opposed to someone like me who's like super logical. But that's a huge advantage in copywriting. So I remember telling you this, and I believe you had no idea like anything about copywriting or internet marketing. Is that right?
Yeah, had no idea at all.
Yeah, that's kind of what I remember. And then I remember kind of explaining it to you and Tanner and talking about like, all right, here's like, I could probably teach you guys how to write emails, and that'd be the quickest way to learn. I remember right after that, a couple weeks later, I told Tanner if he was serious, he should move to Austin. He moved to Austin. And then you came and visited us for, I think it was like 10 days or 14 days or something. Did you end up just staying after that? I can't remember.
Yeah, so I'd been writing emails for like 3 months, and I came out for my birthday to hang out with you guys. And I walked in the door, was like viciously attacked by your Great Danes, which is to say they like were just barking and then licking me. But I was terrified because his dogs were like 180 pounds. They come in the door, and he's like, "Oh, they're harmless." They're like, "Ah." And then he came, he's like, "By the way, happy birthday. I got you a job." I was like, "What?" And it was Dave Sinek with Paleo Hacks decided to, take a chance and, offer me a gig writing emails for him. And that was like my first taste of it, of working at the time.
Right. And you had already been kind of writing 2 to 3 emails a day up until that point, practicing just kind of for the hell of it. You weren't getting paid for any of it. It was kind of this little program I put you and Tanner on to get you guys learning how to actually do this, right?
Yeah. So when I met you, we were on that, basically the promise had been, hey, there's going to be other entrepreneurs there. We're going to give you some ideas about how to get into the space. And there's going to be some business mentors who can teach you. So I had to take time off work to do that. It was going to be, 2 months. And, my work, was basically like, no. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going. So I ended up quitting, my cushy retirement planning job and, going and doing this, not knowing what I was going to do, just trusting that, hey, things would work out, which is, I had some savings, but it was a pretty big jump. And luckily we met. You kind of were like, hey, if you want to make some money doing what I did, I can teach you with all the nice things you said about my writing. And I was like, okay. So, I started writing every day, which was terrible because I didn't really know what I was doing, and so I was trying to write, these emails every day, and we'd get feedback, me and Tanner, who's the other guy you were teaching, every once in a while, and I'd send, emails to you, and it was just like, there's like the only thing right at that point in the email was like, hey, like you wrote, good job, but everything else is terrible, you know? And so I was like, oh man, like, gosh, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this, like, you know. And then you got me the job and I was stoked, but I was also like, oh my gosh, like, what am I gonna do? Like, I'm terrible at this. Like, how am I going to do this? And so what happened had been, I'd planned on staying. I'd asked, hey, would I be able to stay like a week or two? So I bought a one-way ticket to Austin. And after you got me that, I was like, all right, like, I really want to do a good job. Justin's putting his name out there for me. Like, I need to make sure I'm like getting as much as I can as far as like being taught. And so I kind of just was like, all right, well, would you let me stay for a little bit longer? And that just turned into, you know, becoming roommates and, you know, learning in that way.
The frat house.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty cool setup. You know, we had like, you know, the frat leader, you in your own bedroom, you had like a nice queen bed, and then Tanner was downstairs in this like half room that was like all windows, on sleeping on a futon that also doubled as like your dog's feeding room, with like, oh, it was terrible. And then I was upstairs in a loft on an air mattress next to another guy on an air mattress. It was literally just like air mattresses and then like a closet. And that was like the loft that I lived in for like, you know, a couple months while we were there.
We lovingly refer to it as the email factory.
Yeah, literally the email factory, starter house, all that stuff.
Everybody woke up at 8 a.m, checked in, and just started writing their emails.
Yep. No, 100%. I was woken up because you'd get up kind of early and start cooking. I was woken up by like the fan on your vent would be like first thing in the morning. I'd be like, all right, time to get up, you know, roll out of my air mattress. The whole thing like pushes me out because it's deflated at night. It's like shoots me out the side.
Okay, so that was kind of when you started working with Paleo Hacks. I want to go to like those first couple emails you were writing for them. I believe it was like they wanted affiliate swipes, correct?
So it was a mix. So you kind of taught me both that, but also having personality with the email. So they gave me two lists. They're like, write for these. So I interviewed the two faces, right? Which was her name. One was Kelsey Ale, and she wrote like cookbooks, dessert cookbooks that were like healthy, like so paleo, keto. And then another one was this gourmet chef
Pete.
named Pete. Yeah, and so I interviewed them and I started writing for them, but it literally took me 2 months to get started because I was so nervous about starting. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, like they're going to be paying me for this. I need to make sure it's good. Justin stuck his neck out for me. If they're bad, like, you know, it's going to be terrible. So it took me a while and I started writing for them. And they actually didn't say that my emails were terrible. It was worse because they didn't tell me anything. So I got to fill in the blank about like what was happening. So they didn't say anything. I'm like, gosh, they're just being polite and not saying anything. And the emails are just terrible. So every week I'd just be like, from Monday to Thursday, I wouldn't write because I'd be so scared. I'm like, everything I write is just going to be terrible. And then it would hit Friday and I'm like, I have to get them something by Sunday. So I'd be writing like 14 emails in like 3 days and just like killing myself till like 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday to write these things. And it was just like, I just didn't think they were good. You know, I wasn't getting any feedback. You know, you were super busy at the time, so I wasn't really getting you to look at them. And it was just like throwing the work out to the wind and hoping for the best. And, you know, every week was like, gosh, they're going to fire me. They're going to be like, your work sucks. We're going to tell everyone in the industry that your work sucks. We're going to call Justin and be like, you gave us this crap copywriter. We've been paying him. What were you thinking? You're going to kick me out of the house. Like all this stuff that was like the fear of that, just because I didn't have any confidence at the time. Because I was just starting out, you know, I had no idea. It was like getting paid like a decent amount of money. I think I was getting paid like, it was like $100 or $200 an email, something like that, you know? So I was just like, just dying for months. And that's just kind of how it went for a while. You know, that was just, and I just pushed through it and just, you know, I did some work with some coaches and other things that I was doing, and that helped, but it was just pushing through and kind of fighting that and just hoping they didn't fire me every day, you know?
Do you remember kind of your first, let's say, email creative that kind of really hit that you started seeing like on lists over and over again?
The very first one was probably like a diabetes promo that I wrote for a diabetes free plus shipping offer. And it was just like about inflammation, or no, it was an inflammation book, and it was about inflammation. That was like my first one that hit. But to tell you the truth, it wasn't like I got an email and they were like, hey, like, good job, this email is crushing for us. It was like 3 months later, I was going through my email and I was like, wait, I wrote this. And then I started looking and I kept seeing it. They were sending it, like I was subscribed to a bunch of lists, and the company I'd written it for was basically having me write. And then if one of my affiliate swipes hit, they would send it to all their lists. So I was seeing them mail it out like every other day. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, look, they're actually mailing my thing. This is awesome, you know? But I found out 3 months later. And I also had it in my head. I was like, well, that was my one shot. I was a A-list copywriter for all of 3 seconds, and, you know, I'll never write something good again. But yeah, that was like my first hit. And it was cool to see that. I was like, oh, like, that's cool. Like, my stuff's finally out there, you know? And yeah, that was.
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing I want to point out, we tried to get Alec feedback and stats and all that on all of his emails, and the people kind of running stuff over there with Paleo Hacks were just kind of too swamped to ever get him feedback, which really kind of hampered him because it's hard to know what's working, what's not working if you're not actually seeing the data on, okay, this one made 20 sales and this one made 3 sales. Okay, that one was much better. If you're not seeing any of that, you don't have a fucking clue what's actually going on. But you're now getting a little more of that, right? Because now that you're writing with like Jimmy, you're able to see that, I believe, right?
Yeah, so my second client was another supplement client that was basically going to have me do that add personality to their supplement list, and they have in the last year basically had me take over managing the list. So doing the sends through the system they use, which is Maripost, looking at the data. So I'm actually able to see it, and it just helps to make me a little bit more comfortable. And it's funny because the more comfortable you get, the easier it becomes to write, the more concrete your thinking becomes. And suddenly it starts to hit, right? Because for so long when I started, I was trying to make it work instead of just kind of like, hey, like let's try this, see if it works. Let's try this. And then your writing style gets better, it connects better. And then you're actually able to see what works, which is like, if you have a good idea, an interesting story, for whatever you're writing with, that is like the biggest component that makes an email, a piece of copy win. At least in my experience, it's always like goes back to what's the offer? Is it interesting to whoever's reading it? Is it something that can benefit them immediately? Those are the things that really drive the needle and drive the point and move the needle in those emails.
So you're working, I believe now you're working with multiple companies, correct?
Right. So I'm working still with Life Renew, which is Jimmy and writing them. I switched from writing from Paleo Hacks to working with iRolly, which is another company that manages. It's Ed Scow and Mike Geary. And then I've got just a couple other random jobs that I've been doing. I'm working a little bit more with a company called The Sacred Plant, which is a info business that does a lot about how cannabis and cancer. They've got a couple other things, docuseries in there. Jonathan Hunsinger with organics. I'll probably get a project in with him soon. I'm writing for a confidence coach. I don't know what to call Brent. That makes sense at this point. The thing that's funny about copywriters is like, anytime I try to explain my job, I'm like, I actually don't understand what I do. I don't know how I'm going to tell you. And there's like multiple, that's kind of like the coach that I work with too. I'm like, I have no idea explaining what he does, which is, maybe I should get better at that as a copywriter. The whole point of our job is to make things simple to understand. But
let's go back to, so in the beginning you were making, I don't know what, a couple grand a month, maybe 3 or 4 grand a month.
So the beginning, I think it started and it was great. I think it was 6,000 a month. So I was writing 30 emails. I think I
think you're doing them at 100 each.
I was doing 14 emails a week. So 100 an email. And I think I was making like either 6 grand a month or whatever, 28 emails, 5,600, something around there. And then that company actually decided to do less work with me and drop my income down from 6,000 to 3,200. So they basically cut it in half. And I remember that, it was just like, great, now I'm gonna be on the streets in 2 weeks, and as luck would have it, that's when I got hit up with Jimmy and Life Renew. And they started wanting, so my income then jumped to about 7,200. And that's basically what it was for about a year. Because I probably could have done more work, but I didn't have any confidence. Like I really was just completely focused in doing the absolute best job I could for them because I was so scared of losing those clients. Like they were all the money I was making. I couldn't bank on anyone else. I'd get a job here or there, but it was basically those clients were paying all my bills, you know, keeping the house clean, keeping food on the table. And I think as time went on, like stuff would kind of change. So I was making, I think I made 60,000 in like the first year. And then that jumped to about 100,000 in 2019, which was last year. And then I'll probably make somewhere between like 100 and 140, somewhere around there this year.
Nice. Nice. I mean, that's pretty impressive how quick you've kind of gone up simply from focusing on emails. Like you're only just now kind of branching out, doing a little more like long form stuff. And most people that are over that 6-figure mark, it's pretty hard to get there just writing emails. So it's pretty, like I said, it's pretty impressive that you've done that. Let's, I want to dive back into kind of what you were talking about with how has your kind of confidence changed as you've been able to write more, as you've been able to see more data, as you've just kind of gotten more experience under your belt?
So I think the biggest things that help is when I am actually working with the clients, and after so long, they're like, "No, we like have no plans on changing anything. We love the work what you're doing." You know, you start learning some things that are kind of valuable. That you're like, "Oh, I can do this specifically really well. This is working." You kind of figure out what works. That really helps as far as like, "Oh, I don't have to spend as much time just wringing my neck or my hair over, hey, if this email doesn't do well, I'm screwed," basically. Because that's how it feels in the beginning. I was like, every email was like grounds to be fired. Oh, this email didn't do well, you're out of here, and it's like, it just doesn't really, that's like not real life. You're going to have some that do really well and some that don't. So between, that getting confidence from my clients that I'm, no matter, I'm doing good work basically. And then the other thing is getting actual feedback and people looking at it. I know from even just from the last couple of weeks of being in Copy Accelerator, having you and Stefan be like, "No, I think the copy's pretty good." That is like helpful as far as I'm like, "Oh, okay, like the copy's actually good. All right." Like I'm not like a replaceable copywriter because in some ways, until you either get the feedback or see the results consistently where you're like, "Oh, I'm actually writing good stuff," it's hard to not feel like I'm still at square one, and you at times will take like jumps as you kind of see some success, but it's not till you actually kind of like, because the name of the game in this is like, when you're starting out, you just hope to get like 1 out of every 10 that works. And then maybe you jump that up to 2 out of 10, you kind of move from there. But as long as you're hitting it at 10%, 20% rate, you still feel like I'm terrible. Right. Because like, even like school, it's like you're supposed to get all A's, but that's not how it would be. Like you get 90 F's and 10 A's, you're like a great copywriter or whatever, right? You're like solid. And it's like, oh, great. How would that work out? I'm still, I'm at a 20% GPA or whatever, a 2.1.
Yeah, I mean, copywriting definitely is a profession where, especially in the beginning, you're going to fail a lot more than you're going to succeed. And that pretty much goes for everybody. It's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like baseball. It's like, you bat 300 in baseball, you're fucking incredible. You bat 200 and you're like, yeah, you can stay in the league, you can stay in the majors barely. But it's like, but it is like that in the sense, like you're going to fail and things are going to be bad a lot more than they're going to be good. And even the best copywriters, I mean, I've talked with Stefan about this. I've talked with Craig Clemens about this. I had a really good talk with Craig Clemens at an event in January, and we were just kind of talking about some of like our biggest bombs. And like Craig was just rifling off like all these things he had written that just fucking bombed beyond belief and did terrible. And like you wouldn't think Craig Clemens would be writing bombs. He's like, oh yeah, it still happens to me all the time. But I think that's a good point for a lot of newer copywriters that it really is just part of the game. Like we were saying a lot on the Copy Accelerator call yesterday, how a lot of this is very much like dating. Like you could be awesome at picking up women, and guess what? You're still going to get turned down. Like
100%. Yeah.
It's not nothing's ever going to go great all the time for you. So it's pretty similar. I want to kind of go into So you've been doing this now for what, 2.5, 3 years. What are a few of the things that you kind of know now that you kind of understand that you wish you could go back and tell 2017 Alec?
I'm trying to think of anything that I could tell myself from today would actually like help, because I was just a freaking ball of nerves back then as far as like trying to make it. It'd be nice to know that like eventually things would work out, which I kind of like had the feeling like I wasn't going to get fired that first year. Would be nice to know, you know, because it was just so emotionally draining just to always feel like I'm like basically on the edge of failing is what it felt like. You know, you're just standing on the knife's edge of failure where you lean too far one way and you're going to go over the edge. But I think like the biggest thing, you know, would just to be, if I had to go back, I mean, if you can find clients that will help kind of work with you in some ways, you know, I jumped straight into freelance, right? So I was kind of my own one-man ship and kind of responsible for my own training and figure stuff out. But there is a benefit to, you know, learning under someone. And in some ways, Tanner being the other person, learned under Mark for a couple, you know, for almost 2 years, how to write emails and get better and being critiqued. And that's super important. And it's hard to get that either without paying for like a group like Copy Accelerator, or being an organization where they're kind of invested in your success like that.
Yep.
And, you know, it's hard to tell you, you know, all right, well, go to Baltimore and join Agora. But there is a point of that where it's like, they're going to invest in your success and you're going to probably get more help than you would on your own. It's not that it's not doable. And if you pay for the right kind of coaching and do that kind of thing, that would be helpful. But I think if I had had those kinds of, you know, guardrails on and help, that probably would have done a lot just to speed up the process and also not make it feel like every day was my last day.
Right. I remember one thing you mentioned to me because you helped out with my first Beat Your Control event that I held in Austin. I remember a big thing for you being, you kind of just saw everything from like the email side. You didn't really understand the whole holistic thing of like how these direct response businesses work. And I see that with a lot of copywriters. And I remember you kind of saying like how much it really like cleared stuff up for you and put pieces together in terms of like everything that was going on beyond just like the emails that you were writing.
Well, it's super helpful because, like, you know, I didn't come into this to become, you know, 130,000 a year copywriter. Like, most people want to make good money and have, I mean, aspirations of being an offer owner in some way. And, you know, of course, like making millions would be cool. But so seeing kind of all of that and really starting to connect on kind of like what this world is, and beyond just like email copy, just figuring out like what it is that we're doing as marketers, which is, you know, basically figuring out what's bothering people and then figuring out what can help them, and then figuring out what it is that, you know, we can say that would help encourage them to make a decision to actually buy and deal with what's going on, you know? And that's, having kind of that understanding and kind of being in those rooms has made me way more valuable as a copywriter, just because when I have conversations with potential clients, they're like, oh, he's not just a copywriter, he's a really good marketer, which is kind of understanding the whole business. And I'd say that's one of the most valuable things I took from, you know, learning from you, living with you, is just being enriched with this copy knowledge and this direct and this response knowledge, that when I look at the whole thing, I see where an email sits in there, what it's supposed to be doing, where it fits in the funnel, the importance of it. And also in some ways, how little the email matters, as far as like, you need a good idea, you need a good offer still in order for it to work.
Yep. Yep. Cool. So at this point, you've been doing this for a few years. You've hit 6 figures writing emails and doing a little bit of long form. I'm kind of curious, what are your kind of plans and hopes over, let's say, like the next 12 months? Like, where do you kind of want to take things?
Sure. So right now, you know, I'm doing work with those 3 companies that I had mentioned, and I'm kind of just looking at this to improve my skill over the next year. I'm spending quite a bit on coaching, and I have my whole life. You know, the program that I went on where I met you was an investment of about like 45 grand, which was quite a bit of money at the time. And then the next year, you know, was able to get by working with you, you know, as like a mentor, and kind of we became friends before that. So it fit a little bit more naturally. And then joining Copy Accelerator, I got like another coach. And so I've got some big investments in myself as far as my skills as a copywriter, as well as some other work I'm doing. And so for me, my biggest thing is like, all right, well, if I could do these things and get better, even though it's really tough when, 70% of your income, 60 to 70 is what I'm basically putting into my coaching, to give that up. Because like, if I wasn't doing that, I would be able to live like a pretty fun life to a degree, right? But the way I look at it is like, if I can pay for this now and get really that much better, that much quicker, then what I'd be able to make next year will be even more than I would without that. And it will move faster. It's like getting that, it's like skipping levels, right? That maybe would take a year to get through. And so for me, kind of the next year is really focused on learning, increasing my skills, getting my name out there, doing more interviews, anything like that, where I can kind of really become a more well-known in the space, as well as just improving my skill. And then probably, depending on where my income goes in the next year, I would like to start exploring having my own offer at some point. Now, what that looks like, I'm not sure yet, but it's kind of just the idea of kind of like, all right, well, where do I feel like I could help people out? What's something that I could get into that would be exciting for me to write about, exciting for me to start thinking about and creating an offer around? Because I just think that's where the money is. Like I could write copywriting for the rest of my life, but like it doesn't excite me to get out of bed and be like, I basically have projects all week. I'd rather be working on my own thing and have money coming in that way. And so that's kind of like my 2-year plan. And, at 5 years, I hope to have a semi-successful business. I figure it'll be probably between 2 and 4 years. I'd like to give myself that kind of grace of like, I'd like the business to go well, but that's when I'd be really looking for it to be like, oh, I'm starting to make money from this. Right. So I want to get basically good enough where I can make enough money to cover my bills and pay for the things I want to some degree, but then also have time to work on a business. So getting better at copywriting and increasing the amount of money I can make is what my plan is to some degree.
Nice. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I would say the last thing, you're a member of Copy Accelerator now. You have been for a while now. I mean, you helped out with a bunch of stuff. Now you're actually a paying member though. What would you say to someone who's watching this, who thought about joining Copy Accelerator, who has heard of it? What's kind of been your experience with it?
I mean, I think for anyone that's trying to get to the next level, you really need that kind of mentorship, right? Because if we look at like how I got into copywriting, the only reason I was able to get in was you, right? I had a mentor that in this case, I semi paid for the investment of that to meet you, and kind of, we became friends over the program, and we had the shared times, and that's what did it, but if you short of having that, you really need something that's going to push you over the edge and allow you to get better. And not just in a, hey, I'm writing and I think I'm getting better, but concrete things for that. And that's something that I think the group provides and has provided for me, as far as getting feedback from you and Stefan about what's going on, getting ideas from other members, like even just guys like Brian Sparinello, right? How much I've learned from him. He's a freelance guy that's another copywriter in the group who's pretty good, and he's worked for a long time. And so he can help you learn how to set up deals. He's got his own offers too, but it's just the community that you have of learning in that kind of way. And, it's short of, again, like going and working for a company where you're getting kind of that feedback as part of the program, right? And that kind of investment. It's having a group, whether it's your group, another group, if you're working with, a Dan Ferrari or whatever, having people that are going to put their faith in you and invest in you, whether because you're paying for it or otherwise, is super important. And it's kind of what, in some ways, in my belief, it's kind of what you need in order to actually make it. Because again, like, had I not had your kind of backing, it's not like Dave at Paleo Hacks is going to take a chance on Joe Alec, a random 3-month copywriter living from, in Sweden and then in his parents' house, who's, doesn't know what he's doing at all. It was because you put us in touch. You're like, hey, I've trained this guy. I have some faith in him. And that helps. And I still use it when I'm, talking with clients today, where I'm like, hey, like, I'm part of this group. Stefan and Justin look at my copy, because it is a selling point of like, hey, I'm investing in myself. This is important to me. Not only that, you know, I write good copy for you, but I write copy that is going to push your bottom line and make your business more successful and get you more traffic to your offer, whatever it's going to be, you know?
Right. Nice. All right, man. I don't have any other questions for you. Anything else you want to end with?
So my turn to take over the interview. I get to ask you the questions, right? No, I'm kidding. No, I think I'm good, man. I mean, it's nice to just kind of talk about it a little bit. I was thinking about some of the stuff that happened in the first year. It's crazy, you know, now kind of to look back at where I'm at. You know, I'm in my own apartment now. I have my own study in my apartment, so I have like my own office in apartment, which I'm in now, which is just so cool. You know, I've been writing emails from either your couch, a chair, a desk at like a little like lawn chair outside. I was writing in my room for a while. I finally got my own desk, which was awesome. And, you know, I was writing in my room for a while. And it's nice to just see it kind of incrementally growing, and which is kind of like what it's been. And it takes time. Like it feels funny that it's taken, you know, 2-3 years to kind of get where I'm like very comfortable in the space, but it's definitely been worth it as far as like, I really get to control my own life. Like I woke up at 9 o'clock today. I didn't really feel good. So I'm like, oh, I'll take like an hour and hang out. And so that's what I did, you know, made myself some lunch. I've been working kind of in and out. And it's like, it's nice to have that kind of control, which is, I think, what I got into it for to some degree. You know, at Fidelity, I had no control. I was going exactly where they told me, wearing what they wanted me to wear. And now it's kind of like, I have some control over how I live my life, but also like I'm building this skill that is going to be able to make me money for the rest of my life. That's valuable even to people that aren't in the space. And that's cool to have that. And it becomes fun to be able to talk about it and to have this cool skill that makes me money. So I think it's, you know, if you're listening and you're kind of, you know, at the beginning or your year in or wherever you're at, like it does get better if you continue to work, and it might suck to some degree. It like wasn't fun sleeping on an air mattress for 7 months next to another guy sleeping on an air mattress in a house that smelled like, you know, beef and dog pee to some degree. But, you know, like it's because of where we're at. But, you know, it's like you put in the sacrifice of it and then you get out what you put into it, which, you know, put my soul into it. I used to say like writing copy at the beginning was like literally like cutting my wrists and letting the blood bleed into the keyboard, you know. But it gets better from there, you know. And in my opinion, it has been worth the price that, you know, I've paid in the journey that it's been.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome, man. Well, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you sharing your story. I feel like a lot of people, especially newbies and a lot of copywriters, are probably gonna get a lot out of this. So appreciate you opening up and sharing everything. And obviously a big congrats on your success, kind of from where you were 3 years ago to where you're at now. It's pretty amazing to see.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it, man. Appreciate you saying it. And I'm on Facebook too. I didn't even like plug myself, you know, of just like, if you have questions or you just want to reach out, and feel free to. I'm an open book, and, you know, I'll help out as much as I can, because anything I can kind of
you're gonna get a boatload of friend requests and a bunch of random people.
I already like get those. I like look at people. If you do friend request me, send a message that was like, hey, I saw you on this thing. So I don't, it's like, I'll get like random people, you know, who's maybe you're in the group, but it's like from Pakistan. And I'm like, well, I have no mutual friends and I don't want to just deny them, but I also have zero idea who this person is, right. You know?
All right, man. This was great, man. Like I said, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you sharing everything. I hope the audience got a bunch out of this, because Alec really dropped some good knowledge and a lot of things that are going to help you along your way on your copywriting journey. So thanks again, man.
All right, man. I'll catch you later.